Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the organizers for giving me this opportunity to be part of this FDP. Thanks to Ramanujan College Teaching Learning Center and PSGR Krishnamal College for Women and all the participants who are taking part in this refresher course. Today, I just want to talk with you about integration of multidisciplinary courses in undergraduate curriculum, public health as case study. I thought this is the subject which is very apt to all of you, and it's going to be useful for you also to plan many multidisciplinary courses in the backdrop of national education policy. My presentation will be on three different modules, three different aspects I'm going to touch. Redefining the science teaching national education policy, and it will be continued as public health through interdisciplinary lens. Further, I'll be discussing with you about mental health as the world epidemic. Multidisciplinary courses are those courses which are mandatory in a new education policy. So I thought that I can discuss with you something about the redefining the science teaching in new education policy for half an hour, and it will be later continued as public health and why should we take public health as one of the interdisciplinary courses. According to the UNESCO, how do we define the education? And what are those 4 pillars for education? This is about learning to know, learning to do, learning to live together, and learning to be. Philosophically, it is not the information which we want to know. That is what is the first step to know. As well, whatever we have learned, how much it is applicable and how much we are able to do that. And this learning should be able to help us to have a strong network and better citizens and better communities, and how it can be like learning to be as a good human being. These are the 4 pillars of education. A learned person, an educated person, will be transformed into an understanding, sympathetic human being. National education policy. This is 2020, the draft national education policy. After that, it has been released and most of the colleges are in the implementation mode. What is this national education policy expects from all the teachers? Keeping in the sustainability development goals of education, which is a very important and the 4th goal of SDGs. Keeping the ethos of Indian education, Indian value system into consideration. Our government had given a holistic education motto in our new education policy. What does it means? It means there is a paradigm shift in the teaching, which focuses mainly on a positive learning outcomes, increased creativity and innovation, critical thinking and higher order thinking capacities, problem solving abilities, teamwork, and communication skills. This is one measure which is trying to shift totally from rote learning to a holistic learning, and it is trying to promote a student to innovate and inculcate the values and how to think critically and analyze logically. So this is a shift which national education policy has given to all the educators. Now, how are we prepared to face this education policy? how our teaching is going to change with the backdrop of national education policy. Especially, I'll be focusing on science teaching. So, science teaching is totally, it is like a redefining the science teaching to promote all these values. How is it possible? Let's see in the slides which are going to come later. National education policy also focuses on teacher education because there is a lifelong learning and multidisciplinary motto courses have been introduced. So, in a lifelong learning, what exactly it requires? It needs a continuous learning. There will not be any end to the education, and there is multiple exit entry policies which have been introduced. So accordingly, the teacher education has come to a very prominent role. Unless otherwise teachers are trained, they will not be able to handle this multidisciplinary policy which has been introduced. What is it which national education policy is going to touch upon, which we handle through our effective education vertical and Delhi effective education pedagogic cluster? This promotes high performance, raising the level of student achievements. It in general improves the hands-on science, strengthens digital education, which most of you must have already done. Now, address the gaps and barriers in the current education practices. So, with this backdrop, how science education is going to change and what science teachers are going to transform into. Now, basis for all these things is the interdisciplinary study, one of the motto of national education policy. What is this interdisciplinarity? Most of you by this time, I think you must have been doing interdisciplinary programs, interdisciplinary projects. But as a policy, when it has been introduced with the multiple exit entry options, so how exactly we can design the courses and how the students benefit out of this? What is the idea behind this? The idea is like the student should be expected to have good knowledge about different disciplines and how a student is able to connect with the different disciplines and apply the knowledge gained in one discipline to another different discipline. And it enables students to build their own interdisciplinary pathway by choosing courses. So till now, many of the projects of most of the science teachers, they're all having interdisciplinary project. Mostly these days it has become mandatory to a certain extent. But the interdisciplinarity which has been asked is like it is not only the related subjects, the subjects of different areas, different streams can be, students can be together. They can gain the knowledge and they can transfer the knowledge to their peer groups. With that, a student can be able to design a particular program which he wanted from the bucket of the courses which institution is going to offer. So one of the courses which we are going to take as a public health as a course is one such course, which is a very good example of interdisciplinarity and interdisciplinary courses. Now, what else exactly is being expected from the teacher is like totally the inner qualities of a student has to be brought out. So for that, what are the essentials which are required? It's a critical thinking, interactive classes, and experiential learning. That is, mostly the student should be encouraged to ask the questions, to inquire. This is what we call shortly inquiry-based learning. Critical thinking, inquiry, discovery, discussion, and analysis. Many of the science projects and science experiments, they go into this stream. Now, what a teacher is supposed to do is they should encourage the student to ask more questions, more open in their classes for the discussions. Those are the interactive classes. And experiential learning, that a student should be allowed to learn on his own through those projects, and a teacher is going to be the facilitator and the guide. So this is a paradigm shift from a rote learning to experiential learning to develop the global soft skills which are required for a student to compete with his contemporaries worldwide. Now, if you see, this is one of the very important as well as a very common amongst the biologists, if you see that Mendelian genetics. Why I am showing this is, this shows that power of observation. That is, most of our sciences are like to make the students to understand by observing. And that is where the entire genetics have started, by observation, the power of observation, which can be inculcated in the students. This is a famous pea plant experiment, and how Mendel has given the foundation for the entire field of genetics on which many applied sciences have been built upon as well. The other example is observing the nature. It is the Darwinism, and the science or philosophy. It is again a concept of the evolution, how certain changes according to the environment, apart from the environment, they have changed, and how they have been observed, hypothesized, that has been taken into the generations. So both are very strong and very old examples to tell that the power of observation. Now, what a teacher is expected to do? Mostly you will be doing this, remembering and explain your ideas or concepts to make the student understand and apply that information in new situations, helping them to analyze, evaluate the student according to what he has understood, and create a new original work. A teacher is a co-creator. This is what Bloom's taxonomy talks about. A teacher evolves, he helps with the student to perform, to create the knowledge. And what are the various active learning tools which we have in this? So, the redefining the science education, when we talk about, when we memorized, when we understood the power of observation, and when we talk about how to analyze and interpret the results, so then the methodology, the pedagogy also has to change. This pedagogy, which we have been like using in most of these class 12 students, that is the rote learning, from there is a shift into active learning tools. What are these active learning tools? There are many, where we are making student as the participants in the entire process of learning. And I'll give you a few examples in due course. And it is very much like possible in applying these active learning tools in the class. So we can take an example of public health as one of the courses to apply these active learning tools. So how actually it proceeds with the group discussions, group evaluations, case studies, and role playing. These are certain things which are going to impact the student a lot. So the interactive lecture, make a student to ask the questions, make the student to participate in the discussion, and it will be like assessment is very, very important. So the assessment is going to be either with the peer review or with the self-assessment, and improvisation on the hands-on technology, and active review sessions are there. So ultimately, these active learning tools are going to replace the present pedagogical methods which we are using right now. And one of our thing which we also have to keep in mind is what is the time required for an active learning of the student. And as you have seen that, this is a time which is required for the student as you all know, that students may not have that much attention when the classes are going to be like a continuously for a period of an hour or so, especially in these digital platforms, to make the students to focus on their work as well as to the class. It's very difficult. So, keeping into the attention span of a student into consideration, a class lecture can be planned with an advanced organization with 10 to 12 minutes of lecture, and make an activity as an integral part of any lecture. Some of those students who may not be brilliant, but they will be very good in making this activity, and they will be able to learn activity based learning and take them into the second part of the lecture, that is 10 to 12 minutes. Again, give them the activity. This activity may be either a project or a small experiment, small observation, or a video or an audio based questions or a small quizzes, anything you can plan. So when their lecture, when it has been planned in a distributed manner, then the attention span of the students might increase. And this is where the national education policy comes into picture. It encourages the multidisciplinarity, that is the knowledge of not only in the core domain, knowledge from a different domains is very important, and it also promotes the networking. It also helps in the communication skills as well. What are the core essentials? It makes the student to think, critical thinking, and the logical application of the knowledge. Now, one of the tools which we have used and which many of the student teachers have been using this are about the research-based pedagogical tools, which we call it as the RBPTs. So mostly many of you agree that project-based learning is one of the learning which goes long way and which makes a student to understand the concepts very easily. That is where we have all the practicals which are scheduled is only based on the understanding. But if we have to make this into a proper pedagogical tool, then certain things we have to keep it into consideration. They are, what are we actually addressing? What are we are actually making a student to understand? His innovative capacity, the originality of the problem, critical thinking, and inquiry-based learning. So RBPTs as such, if you see that they have a 6R formula is there, which we discuss when we talk about RBPTs in some other platform. But here we can just say that RBPTs are a project-based learning is one of the very successful pedagogical tools. Concept mapping and mind mapping is one of the pedagogical tools which we also use generally to make the student to understand the connectivity about the topics which we are using and how each topic will evolve from the previous topic. So this is about the concept mapping. And many of the active learning tools, they also depend upon the teacher, how they can prepare talks through their lecture plans. Most of the lecture plans, by integrating the local problems, like which we have a climate problem or we have a pollution problem, environmental problems, we can make that as a classroom activity by integrating that and devising certain activities which revolves around this. So with this active learning tools, we can prepare the student for our interdisciplinary courses. This is one of the tutor as a facilitator. He actually makes the students to learn on their own. This is a very good example for our RBPTs. So till now what we discussed is why should we deviate from our the earlier seasoned teaching technologies to the active learning approach. Because the whole education system, when it is moving towards the multidisciplinarity and the lifelong learning, critical thinking, accordingly, teachers also have to evolve, transform. So, for that reason, certain courses also which they generally handle, these are the courses also have to change. So that's why in a new education policy, there is a provision for the multidisciplinary courses. And the domain courses, wherever we have, those are the domain courses, and there are many such courses have been evolved out of that. And one such course is a public health, and which we worked on a public health. So in my next presentation, we are going to talk in detail about a public health, how this can be used as an interdisciplinary course. Before we actually move into that, so there is a question for all of us to think. How do we as educators fit in a student-centered, inquiry-based and technologically charged learning environment? Because these are the students who are mostly digital savvy and they have loads of information through internet, and for them to take them out of that internet and using that information for using this for the innovative purposes, how do we change according to the needs of the student? This is what is the thought I am leaving it to you before we go to our other presentation about the public health as a multidisciplinary course which can be used at an undergraduate level. Thank you. Thanks for the attention.